In the vast majority of countries, non-league football is an entirely amateur pursuit, with games played in regional leagues and on bobbly pitches, in front of crowds that rarely number in the hundreds, let alone in the thousands. That is not the case in England. Last season, a crowd of almost 13,000 fans packed in to witness a mid-season game in the Vanarama National League, which is the highest level of non-league football in England. There is now a former Premier League team competing in England's non-league, as well as players who earn in excess of £4,000 a week. That's more than £200,000 a year. The average attendance across the whole of the National League so far this season, not just at the top clubs, is in excess of 3,000. That's more than some second-tier teams in France, Italy and Spain. A reminder at this stage that the National League is the fifth tier of English football, below the Premier League and all three divisions of the EFL, formerly the Football League, and it is the only nationwide fifth tier in any major footballing nation. What's more, those crowds are rising, and rising fast, up almost 50% since before the pandemic, as non-league football enjoys a real renaissance, despite the incredibly unequal distribution of wealth within the English game. Of the last 10 teams to win promotion from the non-league game up to the EFL, all but one are still in the EFL, that is to say, they haven't dropped down back into non-league football, a couple are now in League One, and another currently occupies an automatic promotion place in League Two. Over in the FA Cup, non-league teams have a proud history of overcoming league sides in famous giant killings, but they are becoming increasingly common. In the last couple of seasons, 20 EFL clubs have been put to the sword by non-league opposition. And last season, National League Boreham Wood became only the 10th non-league team to ever make it to the 5th round of the FA Cup, where they lost 2-0 to Premier League side Everton after knocking out the likes of Wimbledon and AFC Bournemouth. Then there is the fact that a large number of non-league players have gone on to enjoy great success in the Championship and even in the Premier League, whether that be Ashley Williams, Mikel Antonio, or perhaps most famously of all, Jamie Vardy, who went from the reserve team of 8th-tier Stocksbridge Park Steels in Sheffield to winning a Premier League title and a Premier League Golden Boot with Leicester City. So, by almost every possible metric there, the standard of non-league football in England is absolutely outstanding, levels above the non-league game anywhere else in the world, but just why is that the case? Well, as you have probably guessed by this stage, that is what this video is all about. One of the first things to consider when it comes to non-league football in England is its combination of wealth and precarity. England is home to by far the richest top flight, Football League pyramid, and non-league football ecosystem that exists anywhere in the world. The overall wealth within English football, therefore, is extraordinary, but it is nonetheless extremely top-heavy. The gap between the Premier League and the Championship when it comes to finances is enormous. The same goes for the Championship and League One, and so on and so forth. And just as is the case in society more broadly, that wealth, very evidently, does not trickle down from top to bottom. Quite the opposite, in fact. That does not mean, however, that there are no knock-on effects at all for the non-league game in England as a result of being based in the same country as the world's richest and most popular football league. Premier League teams, for example, have some of the largest academies in world football. Teams work tirelessly to scout and recruit Britain's best young footballers, sometimes from as young as 4 years old, which I personally think is ridiculous, but that is another argument for another time, and they then spend the next 10 plus years in some instances training them up, trying to give them the best possible football education with world-class coaches and facilities, only to discard the vast majority of them when they turn 15, 16 or 17 years old. Out of all of the footballers that go into academies from the age of 9 onwards in England, less than 0.5% ever turn professional. You have, quite literally at this stage, probably got a better chance of randomly being appointed as Chancellor. Even at the elite level Premier League academies, 97% of players will never play a single minute of Premier League football, and over 70% will never sign a professional contract with any club, let alone one in the Premier League. Because teams are terrified of missing out on the next Bukayo Saka or Phil Foden though, they continue to increase the size of their youth intake, fully in the knowledge that almost all of those players will never make it because it is just so hard to tell who the success stories will be at that age. Of course, this is true to a certain extent of almost all countries, the difference being that the Premier League and, to a lesser extent, EFL teams can afford to maintain really big academies with lots of players in them, twinned with the fact that the Premier League and, once again, to a lesser extent the Championship, have way more foreign players than almost any other comparable league, and therefore they give fewer opportunities to homegrown academy players, resulting in a bottleneck which leaves thousands of very talented but just not quite talented enough teenage footballers loitering around as free agents. A lot of players will go off and learn a trade or go into further education, if that opportunity is still available to them, after getting released. But for a great many, football is all that they have ever known, they have pinned all of their hopes and dreams on turning professional, and they see no alternative. Inevitably then, a lot of these players released by elite category 1, 2 and 3 level academies drop down into the non-league game, looking to impress there and climb their way back up the Football League pyramid. That is exactly what Jamie Vardy did after getting released by Sheffield Wednesday, or Chris Smalling, who joined non-league Maidstone United after he was released by Millwall, or Ashley Williams, who was let go by West Bromwich Albion before kick-starting his senior career with Hednesford Town in the 7th tier of English football. Of course, for most snubbed academy graduates who drop down to the non-league game, they don't end up becoming Premier League players or full internationals. But that doesn't change the fact that they are all very capable, they've all received elite level coaching from a very young age, and they can all trap a ball, pick a pass, and execute the fundamentals of the game to a really high standard. I've played football with, and against a few players who have been released by professional academies, as I'm sure some of you probably have, and I think that a great many people probably underestimate just how good they are, and how much better they are than your average amateur footballer such as myself. Boreham Wood, for example, who I just picked out at random since they are doing well in the National League at the moment, and they went on that FA Cup run that I mentioned earlier last season. All but one member of their current squad came through a professional academy, with Josh Reese actually having had 1 year as a professional at Arsenal. Meanwhile, someone like George Williams, who came through the MK Dons and Fulham academies, has been capped 7 times by Wales and was part of their Euro 2016 squad that reached the tournament's semi-finals. And he is still only 27. So that is the first thing. Non-league clubs in England are able to hoover up a lot of talented youngsters released by Premier League and EFL academies, and not only that, they're able to employ them as professionals. It used to be the case that when teams dropped out of the Football League, they would turn part-time and semi-professional, or would at least switch to a hybrid system of professionals and semi-pros. Now they can't afford to do that because almost every National League team is full-time. This season, just 3 out of the 24 National League teams aren't fully professional, and even they have several professionals on their books. A whole host of clubs below even the National League, which is the 5th tier, and even below the 6th tier National League North and South, operate on a hybrid model now, training regularly with a really high standard of coaching, making a lot of non-league teams now probably as fit and as professional as League One players as little as a decade ago. There is only one way in which this increased professionalism is made possible, and that is cold hard cash, which brings us to the finances of non-league football. You don't get much money just for playing non-league football. Whilst playing in the Premier League comes with a guaranteed income of in excess of £100 million a season from the league's central pot due to lucrative media and television rights deals, and even down in League Two, teams receive a guaranteed £1.1 million. Over in the National League, the highest level of non-league football in England, that figure stands at just £80,000. A drop of more than 90% from the division above. Clearly then, with several National League players earning in excess of £80,000 a year all on their own, unlike with the Premier League, that is not how most non-league football teams generate their revenue. The biggest sources of income come in the form of matchday revenue and wealthy benefactors. We'll start with the latter. The non-league game operates largely free from the financial restraints of Leagues 1, 2, and even the Championship, where even super rich investors and owners are severely limited in terms of how much cash they can invest in clubs and where they can invest that cash for very good reason. Most people use the catch-all term FFP or financial fair play to refer to these regulations, but in actual fact, they are slightly different in different leagues. In the Championship, for instance, you have profit and sustainability rules, or P&S, whereas in Leagues 1 and 2, clubs come under the remit of the Salary Cost Management Protocol, or SCMP. In the non-league game, however, there are effectively no financial regulations at all. As such, we have seen the likes of Salford City, Crawley Town, AFC Fylde, Fleetwood Town, Ebbsfleet United, Billericay Town, South Shields, Wrexham, and others receive enormous investment respective to the level of football that they were, or indeed are still playing at, over the last decade, as owners see value for money, first and foremost, in terms of the initial outlay required to buy a non-league team rather than an EFL club, more of a project in terms of building that club up from the ground, and greater freedom when it comes to investing their money as they please. It should be noted, of course, that there are very many pitfalls to a football club spending vastly beyond their means and becoming wholly unsustainable without the continued interest and resources of a single individual or group of individuals, hence why still wholly insignificant rules exist in the EFL. Nonetheless, and whilst there have been many horror stories and ultimately liquidations within the non-league game as a result of teams overspending, it has also brought some fantastic players to the non-league scene, whether that be Sergio Torres at Crawley Town a little while back, Adam Rooney famously, who joined Salford City from Aberdeen, or Paul Mullin at Wrexham now, who dropped down to the National League immediately after he had scored 34 goals in a single season at Cambridge United and had won promotion to League One. This is quite a new phenomenon in English football, of some non-league teams being able to outspend teams 2 or, in the most extreme cases, as with Mullins, even 3 divisions above them. Combine the new money within the non-league game. I ought to mention the fact that one of the Salford City owners is a literal billionaire, and the other 6 are all multi-millionaires many times over. With the increased number of former Football League or EFL stalwarts in the non-league game, and it is easy to see how the wealth, quality, and level of interest in the National League in particular has really exploded. Notts County, Southend United, and Oldham Athletic are all competing in the National League this season. Notts County are former FA Cup winners, whose stadium, Meadow Lane, can accommodate just shy of 20,000 spectators. That's more than several Championship clubs and even 2 teams in the Premier League. Southend United had been a Football League team since 1920 prior to their relegation in 2021. They are one of the 2 biggest football clubs in Essex, a county of almost 2 million people, and they were playing in the Championship as recently as 2007. Oldham Athletic, meanwhile, who were only relegated to the National League last season, are the first former Premier League team to drop all the way down to the non-league game. Oldham actually competed in the very first Premier League season in 1992-93, in which they beat Chelsea, Manchester United, and Liverpool en route to survival. Years ago, when a team the size of Notts County or Oldham Athletic dropped down into the non-league game and didn't go bust, you would expect it to only be for a single season. The gulf between league and non-league football was such that tended to be the case. Now that gap has been almost entirely eroded. Not only has the National League become far more professional, with several teams having wealthy owners behind them, but also the teams who come down from League Two each season, invariably, for the last 3 or 4 years at least, have been teams in a state of utter chaos. A bit like the UK government. Alright, Not quite that bad, no one died, but still pretty disastrous. The more established former EFL clubs, who don't have new money behind them, are much more dependent on matchday revenue, which brings us to some of the remarkable crowds that you get at non-league football in England. Last season, Notts County attracted a record attendance that was higher than the capacity of Premier League side Bournemouth's home ground of Vitality Stadium at just shy of 13,000. So far this season, Wrexham have averaged almost 10,000 fans at their home games, Notts County and Oldham Athletic in excess of 7,400, and Chesterfield just a whisker behind them. Those four all have higher average attendances than all but 5 teams in League Two, one division above them, almost half of all teams in League One, 2 divisions above them, and Wrexham's average is higher than that of high-flying Luton Town in the Championship, just 1 league below the Premier League. You just don't see this, at least not with anything like this kind of consistency, at that level of football, anywhere else in the world. And the numbers are rising, up by around 10,000 fans and 45% in the last few seasons alone. Part of that is because some big clubs have been relegated from League Two, bringing big crowds with them, but attendances are pretty much up across the board within the non-league game. There are a number of reasons why this is the case, from fans becoming disillusioned with the commercialisation of the Premier League and football's elite, which has never seemed more out of touch with the average football fan, typified by the proposed European Super League breakaway, to simple economics, as families up and down the country are squeezed by inflation and incompetent governance, rising bills, rising mortgages, and stagnant wages, as the price of attending Premier League and EFL football matches has never been more expensive. We haven't yet seen crowds in the Premier League and the Championship actually fall, but what we have seen over the last few decades now is the demographic of match-going fans in the top 2 leagues changing dramatically, becoming much older and much more affluent. Non-league football, on the other hand, is far more affordable and has attracted almost a cult following in recent years from fans seeking a different experience. It is one where there might only be a few thousand or even only a few hundred of you who follow a team, but you get to have a pint with the players and the chairman after the game, you feel intimately tied to the club, and your emotional investment is far greater than the increasingly sanitised and detached model on offer at the highest level. It is almost as though non-league football is now able to offer the same kind of raw fandom experience that the Football League offered something like 50-odd years ago. It's not just cheaper to watch non-league football than Premier League football as a match-going fan, it is cheaper to watch most non-league teams than it is to watch Premier League football from home in the United Kingdom, given the exorbitant cost of Sky Sports, BT Sport, and Amazon Prime membership, which may well be among the first expenses that people cull as Britain's economic crisis worsens. Because of this, in an unusual kind of way, non-league football could actually benefit from the cost of living crisis in the United Kingdom, and fans becoming unable to afford to watch live football at a higher level. Clearly, that is not a net positive, it is, quite frankly, a catastrophe, but it could be one of many unintended consequences. Lots of football fans only discovered non-league football for the first time during the pandemic, during a period in which you couldn't watch Premier League or EFL games in a stadium, but you could just wander down to your local non-league team and get your football fix there. Many did so for the first time, just because they wanted to experience live football after so long, but almost immediately fell in love with it. And now, they don't want to go back, or at least have started going to non-league games semi-regularly, perhaps when the league team that they also support are playing away from home. Whilst English football is still far less competitive and far more hierarchical than it has ever been in the past, with only one way to break into the upper echelons of the game, and that being to get taken over by either a human rights abusing petrostate or an evil bajillionaire, it does still retain, emotionally at least, if not in reality, an air of openness that is lacking in other countries. Theoretically, you can go from step 13 to the Premier League just by winning promotion 12 times. Sure, no one has done it yet, but it is technically possible. Luton Town, who are the best recent example, were playing non-league football as recently as 2014, following 4 consecutive seasons in the National League, or the Conference Premier as it was at the time. 3 promotions in 6 seasons took the Hatters all the way to the Championship though, and last season, the club from Bedfordshire, on a shoestring budget, made the Championship playoffs, coming within just a couple of matches of reaching the Premier League. It wasn't a freak season either, as Luton currently occupy 5th place in English football's 2nd tier. That provides an extra incentive, both for fans who are able to dream of fairy tales, however unlikely they may actually be, for players, many of whom were released by elite-level academies, and dream of getting back to playing at that level, and for the owners themselves, who see that, again, in theory at least, the sky's the limit in terms of the non-league projects that they take on. One of the biggest hurdles for non-league teams in terms of reaching the EFL is simply the fact that only 2 teams can get promoted from the National League to League Two each season. Whereas the top 3 teams in League Two all earn automatic promotion each season, and a 4th team then goes up via the playoffs, only the National League champions earn automatic promotion, with 2nd to 7th place all going into a playoff process. It's a brutal reality, which has left some chairmen to comment that it is harder to win promotion from the National League than it is to win promotion from League Two. It makes it harder for new money to get out of the league quickly, whilst also making it much trickier for big clubs who come down from the EFL to go straight back up, further increasing the competition and the amount of spending that is required each season to win promotion. So that is why the non-league game in England is so unique. It has been for many years, decades, and indeed centuries in some senses, in terms of the level of support and intrigue, but it has certainly experienced a steep rise in quality in more recent years. Gone are the days of hoofball on bobbly mud baths, on school playing fields, and in pub car parks. Well, alright, not entirely gone, but certainly greatly diminished. Now almost everyone in the National League can play, the league is very nearly on par with League Two, and its improvement and rise in interest shows few signs of slowing down. It would be remiss of me, at the end of this video, not to point out that most non-league football teams are not swimming in cash like Wrexham, and are actually surviving almost on a month-by-month basis. If you don't have a big fan base or a very rich owner prepared to spend lots of cash, making ends meet in non-league football is extremely tough. Despite England being home to the richest football league in the world, and grassroots football alone being worth an estimated £10.16 billion a year to the UK economy, not to mention all of the intangible or at least financially immeasurable benefits that it brings to people's lives, few people who matter have shown a real interest in ensuring its continued existence. A great many non-league teams have been liquidated in recent years, depriving their community of an important lifeblood, and whilst the pandemic has brought a welcome increase in crowd size and people enjoying non-league football, it also brought immense financial hardship, both for the players, many of whom are low to median earners and were let go or put on furlough, and for the clubs themselves, who are so dependent on matchday revenue, unlike Premier League teams to whom matchday revenue typically accounts for less than a third of their overall income. I have made a video about all of the immense threats that face English football due to the unequal distribution of wealth, which you are about to see, linked on your screens now should you wish to watch it, along with a video about the rise of Luton Town, which I mentioned earlier on. But thank you all very much as ever for watching, I hope you enjoyed it. Hit the like button if that was the case, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and feel free to subscribe and turn on notifications for HITC Sevens. You can also find me on Twitter or on Instagram via the username @HITC Sevens on both of them, should you wish to do so.